Buying a gym is either one of the best business decisions you'll ever make or one of the most expensive mistakes of your life. The gap between the two is what we're going to be covering today in our training, How to Buy a Gym Step by Step. I'm John Franklin, the CEO of Two Brain Business, the largest gym mentorship company on the planet. I've personally bought and sold 5 gyms in the New York City area, and with me today is my friend Matt Becker, the head attorney at Gym Lawyers. How you doing, Matt?
Thanks, John. I'm good. As you said, my name is Matthew Becker. I am the owner and lead attorney of Gym Lawyers PLLC. We are the leading legal compliance and transactional firm with a focus solely on the fitness business industry. At Gym Lawyers PLLC, we help gym owners with the legal compliance of their gyms, and also we help buyers and sellers of gyms get through the transactional process, which is why we're here today.
And how much deal flow have you done?
Oh, over the last 4 years, probably somewhere north of $50 million.
Let's go. And the dream. Why most people want to buy a gym. They see it as this path to riches, right? Maybe you're a gym owner. You want to buy that second location. Your current location is doing like $10,000 a month. And you do the quick math. If you get a second location, you'll do $20,000 a month. Or maybe you're a owner operator and you're tired of the owner making all the money.
Yep.
And you want to take over and make all the business decisions that you've wanted to do all along, but have been hamstrung. And it sounds so good on paper, but the reality is a lot of times you are buying headaches.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen that more than I have.
Oh, 100%. People need to know what they're doing when they go in to buy a gym, especially the coach who thinks it looks really easy for the buyer or for the seller who's selling them the gym. And then they go from coach to owner and it's a completely different ballgame.
We're going to try and keep it tactical. I know we're going to talk about a lot of legal jargon, but we're going to show you how to value a gym. We're going to show you how to find off-market deals. We're going to show you how to finance a gym. And Matt is going to show you how to do it so you don't land on any legal landmines. So first, I want to talk about why buying is a great strategy if done well. With buying, you can go to the front of the line. You can skip the start, the 5 to 10 years of pain, going through the build out process, finding the location, negotiating a lease with the landlord, scraping and clawing for those first 20, 30 members, hiring and training a good team. If someone did all that groundwork, you can have that from day one. The first thing you need to know as a buyer or a seller, and the most common question you probably get asked, and I get asked as well, is how do I value a gym?
Yep. How do I know how much my gym is worth?
And so the problem we see is there's usually a huge gap between what the seller wants and what the buyer wants. And a lot of sellers have this like emotional attachment to their gym.
Right.
And they want to get paid for the sweat equity they put in. They want to get paid for the awesome community. They want to get paid for the paint on the wall. But the sweat equity is worth nothing if that gym is not generating money for the owner. And so the basis of any good gym valuation is seller discretionary earnings, or SDE. So Matt, walk us through what is SDE and how do you calculate it?
So I guess from a broad perspective, SDE is every sort of financial benefit you receive from the business. So this may obviously be like your owner's salary or the additional profit that you take through a distribution or draw, but it's more than that because you might run your cell phone through the business, you might run your car payment through the business, your accountant might advise you to like hire your kids in order to reduce your taxable income. All of these are known as add backs. You may run your medical insurance through the business as well. Somebody who comes in and buys your business, they may not run those expenses through the business. So that's going to be additional cash that gets added back. They're just going to go right into their pocket.
And add backs are more art than science.
Yes.
Okay. So what you paid yourself, that is a solid number. What the profit of the business is, we know that. The add back thing is a negotiation. And if you are the buyer, you want that add back number to be as small as possible.
Yep.
If you are the seller, you want that add back number to be huge.
Yes.
And in add backs, you mentioned, car payment, phone payment, health insurance, but that can also include one-off expenses. Let's say you went through like a lawsuit that cost you $10,000. You put that in the add back category. Let's say you sponsored a bunch of T-ball leagues that you didn't need to sponsor. You put that back in there. You're paying your kids. Those are all things that get thrown back into the add back. And as the buyer, you want to negotiate them down as little as possible.
Yes. You also have to watch, if you're doing it from a buyer's perspective, there are ones that, like, if the seller bought a whole bunch of equipment last year, they may try to sneak that in as an add back, but that's not. That's a depreciable business expense that doesn't qualify as an add back. So you got to be careful. And that's why it's an art to know what can and shouldn't be added back.
So let's put pen to paper here. Let's say an owner paid themselves $50,000 and then there was $50,000 in profit.
Yep.
And then the add backs were $30,000. So those were all the things we mentioned.
Right.
The total seller's discretionary earnings would be $130,000 in that case.
Yes.
Right. And that's the baseline number we're going to use for valuing a gym.
Right.
Now, what do gyms typically trade at? So if you have $130,000 of SDE and you are buying a gym, what can you expect to pay for that?
So now we're going to add a multiple, which is going to vary. And we're going to talk about why that might vary from, say, 1 to 2.5. And you're going to multiply that multiple against just the SDE. And then you're going to take that number and you're going to add on your reasonable value of equipment.
Reasonable value of equipment. So the starting point for that equipment is what you paid for all the equipment new. Right. So let's say a gym has $50,000 of Rogue equipment. So that's what you paid Rogue to outfit your gym.
Yep.
A gym owner, like someone who is selling, is going to be like, it's worth 90%. It's Rogue equipment.
Yeah, right.
But the reality is that's not what it's worth. How do you typically value equipment? What's like the ballpark range percentage-wise?
So to get a ballpark range, take your equipment for anything that's over 3 years old, automatically reduce it to 1/3 of its value of original purchase price. Okay. Anything less than 3, go somewhere in there, but much lower than 90%. Because unfortunately, the equipment in functional fitness gyms, it gets beat up. It just doesn't hold its value.
Let's put pen to paper again. So you have your gym with $130,000 of SDE. If it's on the lower end of valuation, you're going to get like a 1x multiple. So you're literally taking the SDE and multiplying by 1.
Yep.
So in that case, it's $130,000 plus the equipment. Let's say in this case, the equipment's worth $50,000.
Yeah.
The value of that gym is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000. If it's a good gym, like a great business, you're going to be closer to 2.5 times seller discretionary earnings. So you're going to take that $130,000 and you're going to multiply it by 2.5. That's literally the multiple. And then you're going to add that equipment value, which will give you a total value of $380,000.
Yes.
That's a pretty big range. So we have to talk about what separates a 1x multiple versus a 2.5x multiple.
Yep.
And there's a ton of factors. So of course we made a slide. Let's go through it quickly so people understand the different things that impact the gym and put it towards the lower end versus the higher end.
Yep.
So growth and churn. Obviously a gym that is shrinking is worth less than one that is growing.
That's right.
And for churn, we want to know if we're buying this gym, are the members going to be there in 6 months? For Two Brain Business, the industry benchmark is under 4% is awesome.
Awesome.
4 to 8% is going to be that okay range. You're looking 2x multiple there. And then if you're losing more than 8% a month, you have a retention problem, and that is going to be a lower value gym.
Yep.
Then we have owner involvement and staff. So how does owner involvement and staff impact the valuation, Matt? So
we want staff that's been around for a while and is there and is able to handle the majority of day-to-day operations. That'll increase the multiple. And we want an owner that's very little, if at all, involved in the day-to-day operations. We call that an owner-operated gym. The more heavily owner-operated it is, the lower the multiple. The less owner-operated it is, the higher we can justify the multiple.
So if you're a guy who's coaching every single class and opens and closes a gym and working 70 hours a week, it's going to be a lot less valuable than somebody who, coaches the noon class and has a full-time gym in place.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And then here's the big one, big asterisk. This is really important. I've been burned so many times here, and Matt will talk about it. Matt, I've been burned so many times. I'm going to tell you what happened to me.
Yep.
And then you can extrapolate that to the rest of the world.
Okay.
Because I have hundreds of thousands of dollars of battle scars here. Okay. So one lease, I had a buyer. So someone came in and said, hey, I want to buy it. And so I was like, great. And then I went to the landlord and said, hey, I want to sell my gym. And he's like, that's fantastic. But the way the lease is written, I'm going to require a new lease with the buyer. And the rent is going to be 50% more than you're paying now. And so that becomes my problem.
Yes.
And substantially impacts the valuation.
Yes.
So explain assignment.
Okay. So an assignment is essentially the ability to bring in the buyer as an additional tenant onto your lease. You maintain liability as the current tenant through the remainder of the current lease term, but you get a second tenant. And that tenant or the buyer then gets to look at all of your lease terms and determine whether or not they like those lease terms. Unfortunately, as you said, most leases are going to require the landlord to give you permission to assign the lease to that buyer. And that gives the landlord the opportunity to say, sorry, John, I'm cutting your lease. I'm going to start a whole new one with the buyer, which creates volatility for the buyer and what those lease terms are actually going to be.
The second time I got burnt, I had a gym that was towards the top end of the SDE multiple range. This was a well-run gym with a manager in place.
Mm-hmm.
I was absentee, but I was located in an area with a ton of development. And the building was going to be developed at some point in the future.
Yep.
So my landlord was only willing to sign a 1-year lease, and it had a 30-day cancellation term in the lease, and they weren't willing to wiggle on that.
Yeah.
And so while I could have got 2.5 to 3 times SDE in that location, I ended up having to sell for closer to 1 because the buyer didn't have the assurance that they were going to be able to run the business and pay back what they were investing into the gym.
Right.
So how does a lease term impact like how should a buyer be looking at lease term?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lot of volatility in that lease. And we see this because we think from a buyer's perspective, we're like, oh, cool, we're going to get into this whole redeveloped area and they're going to bring all these new people in and maybe they're going to be higher income so I can like get a higher income clientele. The problem is that landlord wants to be able to get people out so they can get rid of that building really quickly. And so you have to be careful on that from a buyer's perspective, because if you go in and you spend $150,000, $250,000, $300,000 on this gym, and then all of a sudden, 60 days later, you get a 30-day notice from the landlord to get out, you have literally no repercussions.
The third time I got burnt is I didn't have a permit for one of the gyms that I wanted to sell. And so the landlord required me to get that permit before I sold.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in New York City, where certain permits can take up to 6 to 12 months. And so I didn't have 6 to 12 months. The buyer wanted to buy the gym now. So I had to give my landlord $150,000 to hold on to while the person who bought the gym went out and got that permit. And I had to have the good faith that the buyer was actually going to go execute, or the landlord got to hold on to that money.
Yeah. Okay.
COVID happened. And so that added an extra year where the landlord was holding on to my money on top of the 6 to 12 months that, you know, the permit would have otherwise taken to get.
Yeah.
So permitting, that's another one to consider. Is that common, or is that just kind of like a weird New York thing?
No, it is. So zoning and permitting are two local ordinances that we have to be concerned about as well. Zoning is going to say whether or not you can even run a gym in that space. And so sometimes we'll find out the location isn't zoned for a gym, even though the seller's been running in there for 5 years, which means at any point, building inspection could show up and shut the gym down. Permitting says oftentimes it's a certificate of occupancy saying you have to have a permit from the city in order to run that gym in the space. And again, if you don't, you're technically operating an illegal business.
So you can have an awesome gym with a bad lease and get a terrible multiple, even though you did everything right as a business owner, except for sign the lease, which is probably like an afterthought when you're starting a gym, because nobody starts a gym thinking about, I'm going to sell this one day and I should have the right assignment clause in there.
Yeah.
But if you work with Matt, you will. The final piece is type of buyer. So the type of person buying your gym is going to impact the valuation. What are the types of buyers?
Yep. There's usually 3. There's sort of like the person who you already know, say a coach or a member who's in your gym. They're more of the emotional buyer because they want that gym. They love the community. They want to continue it on after you, but they're going to give you bottom dollar. The second person is somebody in your community who may know about you, but there's not that emotional connection. So we'll give you sort of like middle dollar for it. And then there are the investor people who we all want to sell to. It just depends on how involved we are in the value of our gym. And those people are going to give us top dollar because they see the real value in your gym as a business itself.
So that may be like a competitor looking to expand into your market or something along those lines.
Yep.
Awesome. And so based off of those factors, we can kind of guesstimate where the multiple is. Obviously, you have a more robust process, but you know, we want to keep this light for you too. So if you're looking at 1x, you probably have a bad lease, or the owner's still doing everything. The person's essentially buying a job, and you're going to get bottom dollar for that.
Yep.
If the owner's still somewhat involved, the lease is okay, you got systems-ish in place, you're going to be in that like 1.5 to 2 times SDE. And then if it's a rockin' business where the new buyer can come in and start making money from day one, have staff, systems, all those things, lease, long-term runway to operate, they're going to be more towards the top end, that 2.5 plus times SDE.
That's right. Yep.
Awesome. Now, we didn't mention what happens if a gym isn't profitable.
You get it for free.
That's awesome. I want a free gym. Actually, you don't want a free gym. So what happens if a gym doesn't have a ton of SDE?
In some sense, it kind of depends on who the buyer is. But in the other sense, it's basically a liquidation sale because there is still some value to that equipment. We just don't have any SDE to do a multiple of to add to the equipment.
Yeah. So the SDE is multiplied by 0.
Yeah, right. Or 0 multiplied by 1 is still 0.
Yes. So 0 profit, 0 value. Your gym's essentially worth the liquidation value of the equipment. And sometimes it's worth even less than that.
Right.
So there have been situations where I was approached by a franchisor who wanted me to assume locations that struggling franchisees were in. And these franchisees had put in like $500,000 in build out. And they were just like, take the keys. And I called this the lease liability trap.
Yep.
Why is it a trap? And why would someone give me a gym that has like $500,000 of build out for free?
Because that lease most likely has what's called a personal guarantee. And that means that even though the seller had an LLC or a corporation that they used to sign on as the tenant, the landlord's savvy to that. And they're going to go to the individual and say, you're going to sign a personal guarantee that says, if your gym defaults on the lease in any capacity, I don't even have to sue your legal entity. I can just come straight after you directly. And so in this instance, they've got a failing gym, and yet they're still stuck to this lease for who knows how many more years at how much per month. That's a personal debt. And if they can convince you to come in and I'll give you all of my equipment, I will give you all of this $500,000 worth of build out. All you have to do is assume the lease. You take on the debt. I get to walk away scot-free. I'm like, that's for cost benefit analysis. That lease probably would have cost me more than what I put into the gym to get it started.
For these higher end gyms, we're talking numbers like $300,000, $400,000. These are not amounts of money that gym owners have in their checking accounts.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do a whole section on financing later in the training, but I do want to make a note here that premium gyms are easier to finance and that matters.
Yep.
Now, some people like scrappy work. They like doing turnarounds. They want to get their hands dirty, and you can make awesome money doing that, right? But some people just want something that they can go into. They're willing to pay a higher multiple and just operate with less headache.
Right.
Now, which one is right for you matters on your specific situation, how much money you have, et cetera. So that's why it's important to set up what we call a buy box. And a buy box is just a set of criteria that says, hey, for a gym to work for me, it has to check these boxes. And let's go through like 2 quick examples.
Okay.
So example number 1 would be like the premium gym. You know, if I was looking for a gym today, I'd want something, 3,000 square feet, 60+% of the revenue comes from small group personal training. I want it close to my house. I want a long-term lease because I don't want to worry about moving and renegotiating and doing all these things. I want an awesome manager and awesome coaches and awesome systems in place.
Right.
So that way I can just show up on day one and start making little operational changes. Now, I want to see 3 years of consistent profit as well. I want to know that the gym has been profitable for a while.
Right.
I know I'm going to pay more for that, but that is my buy box. So when I go out to look, these are the things I want. But let's say like example 2, maybe you're someone who wants to get your hands a little dirty. You want to hit a home run. Maybe you're someone who, wants to buy a struggling CrossFit in your area. So that may be something like, I want a CrossFit affiliate, 5,000 square feet. The SDE is under $50,000 because we talked about low SDE, low value. So maybe you're buying this for like equipment cost, maybe a little over equipment cost. And that way you can just show up, start operating, turn around the gym day one. Another thing, maybe like a poor online presence, bad Google reviews, bad staff, whatever. Something that's going to be a lot more work, but a lot cheaper.
A lot of low hanging fruit to flip around.
And that is your buy box. But it's just important to identify that at the beginning so you know what you are looking for.
Exactly.
So once we have our buy box set up, we move to phase 2 of the process, the actual search.
How do we find a gym?
And so most people will just go to Biz Buy Sell and type gym for sale. And look at the stuff there. And the reality is that stuff is really picked over. Or they'll go to like a Facebook group and try and find something in their market. But the reality is 80 to 90% of these deals happen off market.
That's right.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, the gym owner oftentimes doesn't want to say that they're selling because they know that once they do that, they risk losing coaches and they risk losing members. And all of their value is, or majority of their value is based on that membership. And they don't want to scare their members away when all of a sudden they're trying to sell their gym. Or their gym just isn't worth enough to put on the market because they're too involved as the owner operators. And an investor who's going to be on those biz buy sell websites, they don't want to buy the job. They want to buy a book of business. So they're just not going to be interested in that gym.
And the reality is around 50% of gym owners are just amenable to a sale, right? If someone just asks them, they'd say like, yeah. But they don't want to go through the process of listing it and finding a buyer and getting ready for purchase. And some of the businesses are just too small to go through like traditional channels. We create this publication every year called The State of the Industry, where we get data from large gym management software providers along with our own two-brain data set. And we ask them like, hey, would you be open to selling your gym? And I think 46.9% of gym owners, 50% would consider selling. So that's why it's important to establish that buy box and just search yourself. Like, hey, this one looks good. This one looks good. And just make a list of things that, this gym would fit my criteria. And once you do that, it's just as simple as like sending the owner an email. This is the one I used for every one of my deals. I would just do the headline, interested in selling. And then I'd say, hey, Matt, I'm John. I'm buying gyms in the Philadelphia area. Your gym looks like it meets my criteria. Would you be interested in selling? And most of the time they're going to say yes. And some people are going to say like, hey, I don't want to reach out to my competitors to see if they're interested in selling. That feels a little weird.
Can feel weird.
What can I do in a situation like that?
We actually do this for individuals and gym owners who may just, it's kind of like brokering, who may just want us to reach out to those gyms and say, if you're ever interested in selling, let me know. I have an interested buyer. And it does work.
And so at that point, you're going to send 10 emails, 5 people are going to say yes. And we're going to move on to the dating phase.
That's right.
So we're going to get them on a call. And on that first call, we just have 2 objectives. The first one is to make sure the owner likes you, right? Because you're going to be working together. You're going to be negotiating. It's a drawn out process, right? From this point to the close, we're looking 3-4 months, maybe
at least.
And you're going to go to battle. Lawyer's going to lawyer. All right. And so building rapport is that first step. The second step is just making sure the gym actually fits your buy box. So just asking these high level questions. Hey, how many members do you have? How much of your revenue comes from this thing? What does your top line look like? What does your churn look like? And most of the time, the gym owner isn't going to know the exact numbers, right? And so once we have our, punch list, right? Maybe 2 or 3 meet the criteria. And we want to move to the next phase.
That's right.
We get Matt involved.
Here I come.
And we want to look at the actual data, right? Because you can tell me you have 200 members and you make $20,000 a month in profit, but most of the time that may or may not be true. It's not that they're lying to you. They may just not know their numbers. And so we need a legal document at this phase. So what is the first legal document in this journey called?
So now we want to look at some of the information from the gym to start to get some of the financials. In order to do that, we're going to have to tell the seller, like, look, we want to see some personal information, but we won't tell anybody. And in order to do that legally, we present them with a non-disclosure agreement. And that's essentially just the agreement that I say, hey, John, I need to see tax returns, I need to see P&Ls, whatever. And I can tell you exactly, here we go. We want to see 3 years of tax returns. I want to see 3 years of P&Ls, a trailing 12 months, some balance sheets, some churn rates, a copy of your lease. I promise through this legal document, I will not share this with anybody other than my professionals, maybe your CPA and your legal counsel.
So once you look at that, you get a rough idea of what's actually happening under the hood. And then it becomes time for another legal document.
There it is.
This is called the letter of intent or the LOI.
The LOI.
And so what goes into this?
So a couple of primary things. This is where we put all of our cards out on the table in the beginning to say, this is the purchase price I think I want to give you. Maybe this is how I'm going to pay for it. Maybe this is the type of sale, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And these are all the conditions that we have to meet in order to get from where we are now to me actually buying your gym. And we put it out on the table. And if the seller won't sign it, then we know this thing's dead in the water. There's not even a point to go on to the next phase. But if they will sell it, cool. Or if they'll sign it, then great. We now at least have a commitment to move on to the next phase.
And when you say commitment, that doesn't mean it's binding.
That's right.
If you're the buyer and you sign an LOI, it doesn't mean you have to buy it.
That's
usually
correct.
You can walk away.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because during this time, we move to the next phase, which is due diligence. So you are confirming the confirmation of the confirmation during this due diligence phase. And we need more professionals for that. So what are we doing here?
Yeah. So this is the buyer's opportunity to look under the hood and in the closets of everything for the seller. We can look at deeper dive into their financials. We can start to ask for more churn reports, other reports from like their client management software. We can start to look at permits like you had with your issues, liens, which I can discuss a little bit more in a minute. We can start to look at lawsuits that might be pending out there, all of these problems. The number one problem for buyers is they try to truncate this or skip it completely because it's like onerous at times. And that's where, these bombshells or landmines pop up after closings because we didn't do our due diligence.
Trust but verify is the name of the game here, right? Yes. Because it's another gym owner. Like you're going to have rapport. You're going to like him. Hey, I trust Steve. Of course he's got 200 members. Right. It says it in Kilo that he's got 200 members, but 50 of those may not be paying. You don't know. So on the flip side, you want to be walking the actual space. Mm-hmm. This is a time where you may want to be talking to staff if the owner feels comfortable with that. And you just want to be looking at all the different parts of the business that you as a gym owner want. You on the lawyer side, you want a CPA to look at all the financials. Yep. And then on the lawyer side, talk through liens and how that might hold up a deal.
Sure. So these are big deals right now because we're still kind of coming out of COVID when people had EIDL loans and PPP loans and SBA loans, and you may have an equipment loan or something else. And whenever you have that creditor can then file a piece of paper with your state that says, John owes me money. And in order to make sure that John pays me, I'm going to put a lien on all of John's gym equipment and memberships and accounts receivable, accounts payable, and everything of value. And if you ever want to get rid of all that, sell it in an asset sale, you have to pay me first. And so from the buyer's perspective, if we never check this and the buyer goes and gives you $200,000 for your gym and you default on that SBA loan or the other loan, they can come and they can take all of the equipment back from the buyer, all of the memberships and everything, all those assets back from the buyer, and the buyer can't do anything about it.
And this is super common because of all the COVID loans that happened.
Yep.
Right. And a lot of gym owners may not know that they have a lien.
Probably don't even have a lien out there. They may know they have a loan, but they don't know they have a lien.
And that's why it's important to work with a lawyer who has experience in the gym space. Like, don't hire your cousin who's a divorce attorney. Right. Like, these are where the skeletons in the closet are hiding. You want someone who knows where to look. Now, while you're doing all this legal diligence, you got to figure out how you're going to pay for this thing, right? And so for these gyms that are struggling, right? I think 500,000 is kind of the benchmark. These cheaper gyms, right? Most of the time, it's going to be some form of seller financing, maybe a line of credit from your existing business or you personally, if you don't have a business, or you're going to get money from the 3 F's: friends, family, and fools. Now, let's talk about seller financing because that's such a huge part in some of these smaller deals. Explain what seller financing is and how these terms work. And if you're a buyer or if you're a seller, what you should expect here.
Okay. So seller financing is basically saying that the seller is going to allow the buyer to pay out installments over a period of time. It's kind of like a loan without getting the actual money from the loan. So I agree where I'm going to buy your gym for $200,000. I only have $50,000 cash. I give you that $50,000 and you agree to allow me to pay the other $150,000 out over, say, 5 years, 60 months, monthly installment payments with some kind of an interest rate. It's very risky on the part of the seller, but unfortunately, like you said, for those gyms that are sub $500,000, they're typically selling to somebody who doesn't have a lot of cash, probably doesn't have a lot of credit, can't get a loan. And so that's oftentimes the only option for that seller.
And what percentage of the deals that you do have some form of seller finance?
I'd say easily 60% of those deals that are under $500,000.
And what percent of the purchase price is usually seller financed?
Probably, again, somewhere upwards of around 60 to 70%.
Now, this is where the premium comes in, talking about a good gym, because there's an organization called the SBA in the US, and their job is to help people buy small businesses. They exist for stuff like this. And you can get what's called a 7A loan that is going to allow you to finance the purchase of a larger gym that has stable cash flow over a longer period of time.
Right.
To qualify for this, you need a 650 credit score. The gym needs 2 years of strong operating profit. You need industry expertise, and you have to personally guarantee it, which means you're on the hook if you don't pay this, right? So you just can't shut your business down. They're going to go, the SBA is going to go.
They'll come after you eventually.
Okay. And so What this might look like is, let's say I'm going to buy your gym, Matt, for $300,000. The SBA is going to want 10 to 20% down. So 30 to 60,000, 10 to 20% of that purchase price. And then they're going to finance the remaining portion. Okay. And let's talk about why this is useful. And there are all types of calculators to do this. You can Google SBA loan calculator to figure out the specifics of your deal. But let's say I have 20% to put down in this deal. Let's say I have 60,000 in my pocket. I'm going to pay you that 60,000. The SBA is going to loan me the other 240,000. I was off by 10,000. So 5250. Now they're going to do that over 10 years at an interest rate. At the time of filming, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, 7 to let's say 8.5,
somewhere in there. Yep.
Yeah. And so what that might look like is on your $240,000 loan, you're going to make a monthly payment of just over $2,800. So let's say, in the case of a gym that you're buying for $300,000, you can expect profit to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, 100 to 150,000, right? That's not unreasonable here.
Yeah.
So if you have that 100 to 150,000, you're going to pay your $2,800 a month to the SBA to fulfill your loan requirement, and you get to pocket the rest, right?
Pocket the rest. Yeah.
And that's awesome. And that's why we talk about, if you do this right, this can be an incredible strategy because you get to skip the line. You can be in a position where you're just paying off that loan, but everything else goes in your pocket. If you're someone who's buying right, you can make 6 figures as a gym owner.
Right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate.
And you're also going to pay this off over 10 years versus seller financing. I've never had a seller agree to financing anything over 7 years, and 7 years is a unicorn. They usually want their money in somewhere between 4 to 5 years.
So while you're taking a little more risk, you're buying a more stable business and you're making a smaller loan payment. So it's actually leading to a better lifestyle if you do it right. Now, we know how to pay for the gym. Yeah. We got the gym we want. Yeah. We have it under LOI.
I'm getting excited.
Now we're moving to the most fun phase, which is legal execution.
All right. So this is going to be where now what we call the definitive purchase paperwork comes into place. We're getting toward the end of that due diligence. And now we're going to say all the attorneys are going to get excited and we're going to come to the table and the buyer typically presents the asset purchase agreement or the stock purchase agreement and a couple of other ancillary documents that go along with it. We would have decided back at the LOI phase whether this is a stock sale or an asset sale. So you're selling me the gym and you're selling me the gym through your corporation or your LLC. If I buy your corporation or LLC, that's a stock sale. I'm literally buying the stock of your legal entity. In the fitness industry, we don't typically do that. I just buy the assets of your gym with my own LLC, which is going to be the equipment, the memberships, and if I want it, your branding. So typically in the fitness industry, we do an asset purchase, and there's only rare instances in which we would do a stock purchase, but that's going to dictate what type of purchase agreement we all negotiate over.
And what would be a reason why, as a seller, you would want to sell your LLC versus, just the carcass?
Yep. So from a seller's perspective, if it is going to be a very heavily seller financed transaction, and the seller is really nervous about seller financing, we would almost push the buyer to make this a stock purchase, because then it becomes super turnkey. If there's a problem and the buyer starts to default on the payments, the seller just goes in and takes back the LLC. We didn't change the bank account. We didn't change over who owns the equipment. We didn't change the client management software, who got paid. We didn't have to do a lot with changing any of the contracts for the membership agreements, the liability waivers, and everything else. I took you out of the LLC. You put me in, and it's much easier for the seller to take that back.
And it's also faster for the buyer, right? Because he doesn't have to make all these new legal entities and register with all the government agencies, et cetera. Like, they're just rocking and rolling.
Yep. That would be the only reason really a seller would, or one of the only reasons a buyer would consider a stock purchase.
We're making it sound good, but it's really rare. What percentage of your purchases are asset purchases?
Oh my God. Oh, asset purchases? Let's say 98%.
Okay. So just to be clear, it's way more common. The reason for that is there's always a catch.
Yes.
Right. And that is liability. Mm-hmm. So if you are taking over the stock, you are responsible for the liability. So give me an example of how this could go bad.
Yep. So I'm a member of your gym and I come in today and I hurt myself. I didn't tell anybody. I just hurt myself. Fell off a box jump, wrenched my back on a deadlift, something like that. And then 3 months later, you sell your gym to somebody. And a month later, I finish rehab. You stock sold to somebody. And I sue the gym. The new buyer just absorbed that lawsuit that took place prior to them even owning the gym, because they, through the stock sale, they bought all of the liabilities as well. It's called the tail of liability, and it's going to last for somewhere between 2 to 3 years post-closing, depending on your state's statute of limitations for personal injury.
So I could be fighting a lawsuit for something that happened when I didn't own the gym.
Yep. Wasn't even your fault.
And that's why it's almost always asset purchases versus stock purchases.
Correct.
And so again, that's usually decided in the LOI phase. We just want to talk about it here because it's a little dense and legal.
Yeah.
What else is happening during this process as we're figuring out the definitive purchase agreement, like as we're trying to get this deal to the finish line?
Yep. So these are the agreements. Remember, we talked about the LOI was all non-binding. Well, now we're going to solidify all those terms in the purchase agreement. So now we can't back away. If you're going to offer $300,000 and we put that in the purchase agreement and you sign it, it's $300,000. All right. This brings everything to literally a closing. There are sections within the purchase agreement that are going to protect the buyer post-closing. They're called representations and warranties for the legal jargon, but it's basically you as the seller. These are all the guarantees that you made me while I was going through due diligence or while you were convincing me to buy your gym, that I don't want to find out post-closing you were either lying or you didn't fully give me the truth. Maybe you didn't know, okay? I know it's the same thing lying, but maybe you just didn't know, okay? And so that we cover that in the purchase agreement so that there's no surprises, or if there is a surprise, I have a fraudulent misrepresentation lawsuit against you, which is a really bad lawsuit as a seller you don't want to handle. The other thing we do is through what are called indemnifications. Is let's talk about that situation again where the guy gets hurt in your gym. Even if I buy just the assets of your gym, the person who got hurt doesn't know that. All they see is such and such gym name that I just absorbed, bought the assets for. They're still going to sue me. And I'm going to absorb a whole bunch of costs defending against that lawsuit. That's not my issue. So I'm going to be able to pull you in to indemnify or hold me harmless from all the financial issues that come for defending that lawsuit.
And to give the listeners an idea of the sheer amount of lawyering going on in this phase. So NDA is usually like 1 page, right?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. And then the LOI is usually how many pages?
Let's say 3 to 5.
3 to 5 pages. Okay. And then the asset purchase agreement. So this is the binding one. How many pages is this?
If we're lucky, only 20.
Okay. But if we're not lucky?
Oh gosh, 50, 60, 100.
Yeah. This is where Matt makes his money. This is Matt's favorite phase of the process. It will be your least favorite phase, gym owner. Okay. So the name of this training is How to Buy a Gym Step by Step. So let's review. So we want to build our buy box. We need to understand how to value a gym as well. From there, we're going to start the search based off of what's in our buy box. And we're going to identify locations that may potentially meet the buy box.
Yep.
Then we're going to date. We're going to do that first call and make sure that it's actually in our buy box and this is a location we want to pursue.
Yep.
Then it's time for the heavy lawyering. We got the LOI. That's where you come in.
Yep.
It's usually LOI to start of drafting purchase agreement. How long does that usually take?
45 to 60 days.
45 to 60 days. And then once that's done, and usually due diligence is happening in that period.
That's right. Yep.
Like that's when you're peeking under the hood, doing all that stuff. And then from there to when you actually sign the purchase agreement, how long does that usually take?
Let's say 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
So you're looking around like 4 months end to end here, right? Even if things are going well, maybe 3.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
This is where like we get to, lawyers like, it depends, because there are so many factors that come into play during this. It's really hard to give anybody estimates, but those are as much of estimates as I could give. Yep.
And then phase 5, the clean close. So once you sign that agreement, it's done. You own the gym.
Yes, that is it. I mean, technically speaking, you own the gym. You're now making payments to the seller, you're making payments to the SBA, or you paid cash. And now it's just your job to make sure that this gym continues on and supports you and makes you tons and tons of money. And
that's when you talk to Two Brain. You get yourself a mentor, because we just talked about a ton of landmines that can happen during this process, but there's a whole new set of landmines that happen once you actually start operating the business.
You need a professional to tell you how to do it through mentorship.
Yeah. And so we said this in the beginning of the training. I'm going to say it at the end. The most expensive mistakes happen during this process. And the most expensive mistakes are ones you do not see coming.
Yes.
Some little slip up here can be 100 times more expensive than what it would cost to just get professional help.
Yes.
So if this was helpful for you and you are ready to buy a gym, or if you are ready to sell a gym, what I want you to do is take out your phone and take a picture of that QR code on the right. It's going to take you to Matt's website. From there, you're just going to fill out a form. You'll see his calendar and you can book a consultation with him. Are you charging for that thing?
Nope. It's a free consultation.
And then when they sign, Matt, where are you sending them?
And so right as we get close to signing the documents, I'm going to send you back over to scan the QR code on the left, and you're going to talk to a member of John's team, and they're going to set you up with a mentor. And you're going to work with that mentor one-on-one post-closing to make sure that you do everything that you can to make that gym as profitable as it can be for the long term.
Guys, thanks for watching. And Matt, thank you for giving everybody a free consultation and putting money in their pocket and helping people avoid expensive mistakes. I cannot stress this enough. Do not use ChatGPT during this process. This is not where you want to save a little bit of money. If you are going to buy a gym, you want to do it the right way. And as we showed, this can be one of the most rewarding financial decisions you make in your career, or this can cause absolute financial destruction. So make the right move, book a call with Matt's team. And if you want help growing your gym, talk to somebody at Two Brain.